Welcome to this week's edition of the Terry's Talkin podcast. I'm David Campbell, your host, sports manager at cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer. And as always, Terry Pluto, award-winning columnist for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Terry, sad week in Cleveland with the passing of John Adams on Monday. I wanted to kind of start with him first, and I think you do too. I was really struck. Well, number one, I thought you wrote a lovely column off of the news. John Adams, of course, the longtime drummer for he's Cleveland's baseball drummer, and he brought so many fans together. But I thought you wrote a lovely column on Monday when he passed away at age 71. And the headline on it was How to Remember John Adams. He wanted to make people feel better. And I know you'd spent some time with John, and we talked about that on the podcast last fall. You went out to visit him. Why don't you just talk about what he meant to you and kind of that visit you had with him? I thought it was really just touching the way he approached life.
Actually, I saw John several times. I think three out there. A couple times for the story, one other time deliver the papers, talked to him on the phone a couple of times, and I was honored. I got a call from Curtis Danberg. They want me to be a pallbearer Sunday or Saturday for the thing, so which surprised me because as I wrote, I had known John for decades as 5-10 minute conversations, but it wasn't until that I kind of went out for the story and we connected that we talked quite a bit about baseball, life, death, the whole thing. And so I think that's what fans were really back when the original story came. I know it had one of the highest totals of hits that we had on cleveland.com for the entire year back in October. And it just keeps people still reading the original one from October plus all of these because as several people wrote me, he was one of us. They identified with him. He was not an employee of the Guardians or Indians back in the day. He worked at AT&T for 40 some years. He came out first few years, they didn't even give him a free ticket. He was out there just with the drum and he just kind of did it on his own. And one difference, I didn't write this, but I was thinking about this later. One difference between John Adams and many of these other kind of super fans who sort of come and go is John's personality and humility. He stuck with it for nearly 50 years. And I mean, I've gotten hundreds of emails, David, and I haven't gotten one about John being a jerk to anybody. And frankly, I'm sure there's some out there that's like, I try to be nice to most people, but I've had some bad moments. And so that's a remarkable testimony where you say, well, I make people feel better. That's what he did. And people keep sending me pictures of themselves with John. He must have posed with everybody in the bleachers at some point.
Yeah, and that was the thing that really I loved about John Adams, and I didn't grow up with him like a lot of people here did, but you're right, Terry. You see some of these quote unquote super fans, and the league kind of cultivates them, and they mug for the camera, and they think they're celebrities, and they really just try to fawn for the public. And John was the opposite of that. Like he's like, well, I'm going to go to the games when I can make it, and when I can't, it's no big deal. I do this because I love the team and I want to be there. And he did it because it's like he wasn't a super fan. He was like a super man. You know what I mean? Like he was just a great guy that people wanted to be around. And that was I thought your headline captured it perfectly. He wanted to make people feel better, even when the team was bad.
Mm-hmm.
Once they got a guy in scoring position, the drum would start, and it kind of always gave fans hope, regardless
and when they
of where
saw
the
him,
team was. Yeah,
it was somebody to talk to. And the other thing that John was smart not to do compared to a lot of these super fans is he wasn't calling radio talk stations with his opinion on the team. When you're around him, he didn't start telling you that the manager ought to be fired or whatnot. I mean, he was into the game, but he wasn't a know-it-all. And those are things that, what do you want people to say about you after you pass away? That you were a good guy. You treated people as you would want to be treated. John walked out his faith. I love his line. I was a kosher Catholic, and the funeral on Saturday is going to be at St. Evangeline Church downtown on East 9th. And I know that, it's a tough one because he was really kind of praying and hoping against hope that somehow he could get past that onslaught of health things that hit him. And this is a guy that was healthy for years and taught swimming class for disabled people at Cleveland State on the side. That was one of his passions. And, he was a guy that bang the drum for a lot of charities locally. Those are the stuff that he liked to do. And it's just a shame that, I mean, can you imagine if he'd have been there last year for 2022 with all those ninth inning rallies and the drum? I mean, it just could have been a dream. I mean, he loved watching it on TV, and he was telling me about that. But still, it just would have been a glorious time for him. And different people have written, well, can they get somebody else to bang the drum or whatever? I don't know. I'm not sure it's a good idea.
Yeah, and just he just it was so uplifting just to read what he told you about it. So many people who would be going through what he was going through would,
Yeah.
feel so sad for themselves and, well, I've had a rough go.
Hmm.
And he just said, I'm so thankful for everything I've experienced. Like, there's some people who just spread hope, and he just seemed like one of those people
And he
that,
talked about,
regardless
I
of who
had
you
my,
met, he always just
yeah.
uplifted people. I'm sorry, Terry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, he said I had my pity parties and that, but I watched him too. There, this is another thing because I spend 5 days a week in nursing homes in the morning, stopping in to see my. She's not my bio mom, but this lady Melva has been like my mom for over 20 years, and she's been in nursing home in Fairlawn for 5. So I'm quite familiar with the nursing home culture, and you watch how certain people treat the aides and the nurses. And it's a tough go there, like everywhere else, because of the labor shortage. And John was really nice to the different aides that came in. And you could tell that they liked him and he knew them and called them by name, that kind of stuff. So that was another thing that just struck me. And I mean, I would not want to drag a drum to a game 81 times a year in Cleveland. I'm just telling you, I wouldn't. And sit in the bleachers because you got the rain, you got the snow, you got the bad team, and I'm sure he never told me about it, but he must have run into some jerky fans. I mean, it's life out there. It was interesting though. If you wanted to bang the drum, you only got one shot at it. That was it.
If you
One
didn't do
beat
it,
and you're done. And of
the one
course,
beat limit.
he was he was funny talking about. I mean, the guy John was a good drummer. Overall, I mean, he could play classical, Dixieland, uh, especially rock. He was in a couple of rock bands now and then, and he jammed with some guys from the James Gang, and so he had a lot of talent. And his line always was, "I could teach a monkey to drum like this in 5 minutes." Um, Although I got an email from a couple fans that, well, actually before the game, once in a while we got him to kind of do something. He goes, you could tell he could really drum. He would kind of turn it on a little bit out there as opposed to the same drum beat. And he just started because he thought it was sort of dumb. Everybody's just banging on those old wooden chairs at the old stadium. So why not just have a drummer with a drum?
All right, Terry. So, real quick, I want to just, for people who haven't seen the information, the calling hours for John Adams are going to take place from 3 to 7 p.m. on Friday, and that's going to be at Ferfolia Funeral Home. That's 356 West Aurora Road in Sagamore Hills. And then the funeral mass is set for 10 a.m., as you mentioned, on Saturday at the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist downtown at 9th and Superior. So I'm sure there's going to be a big outpouring of fans who will be at that. You mentioned all
Oh,
the letters. Yeah, go
I'm
ahead,
sorry,
Terry.
one other thing on John before I forget, because um, the Guardians really, especially Curtis Danberg and Bobby DiBiasio, but some others, especially those two, they made sure they stayed in touch with John. Curtis would visit John at least once or twice a week. In fact, John loved corned beef, and Curtis told me yesterday when we were talking, Curtis Danberg, the VP from the Guardians, he said, you know, um, 5 days before he died, I was talking to him, and he goes, man, I could really go for a corned beef sandwich. So Curtis took him a corned beef sandwich. I mean, look, at this point, you're in your final innings. It's not time to worry about the diet. And then actually, the next day, he went into intensive care, and a few days later, he had passed away. So, but that was it. So, that actually sounds like a typical kind of Cleveland guy. Well, what's your final meal? I'll go for the corned beef.
Yeah, it was just a lovely relationship between the team and John,
And
and
him,
and
yeah.
and it went on for years. And you, Terry, you were part of it too, and I'm really glad you're able to be there as part of the
Because really, I
service.
just kind of came on at the end. I just had a very, very casual relationship with him until then, but we just clicked. And um, I've seen God bless me with getting to know some people, and because of my job too. And I'm not talking about, John's the most famous normal person I think in Cleveland history. I mean, he's a normal
Great way to put
guy,
it.
and
Yeah.
he's famous over decades. I mean, one of the emails I love, a guy wrote, I didn't realize every team didn't have a drummer until I went to like a game in Pittsburgh because I grew up. There's always this guy banging a drum, and you heard it on the radio.
So Terry, looking forward here, I mean, and we've written about this, and you've talked
Mm-hmm.
about it, that there is a tribute to John Adams out in center field, along with the other memorial plaques. There's a drum out there and a bench. I want to read this letter that we got from Neil Hausch from Akron. And he says, "Hey, David
Mm-hmm.
and Terry, no one can replace what John Adams meant to Cleveland baseball, as he really was the heartbeat of the ballpark," which I think is a wonderful phrase. "Despite a few celebrity cameos to play the drum, the franchise has not done anything to continue the tradition John started." Well, I mean, it's very soon. But Terry, why do you think this is the case? Considering this team and the excitement for the upcoming season, why not audition for a new full-time drummer? Thank you both. What do you think of the idea of carrying on John's tradition, or should they let it just end with
Man,
John? What does your heart tell you?
I wish I had that email to ask John. It would be interesting to see what he thought. Yeah, you
It's a
could
tough one.
audition. It's a tough one because you don't want a pro. That's what I'm thinking. There'll be all these drummers that want a pro, and kind of I get in there. I'm the guy that replaced him, and try to market themselves.
Yeah. You know what
I
it kind
don't
of reminds me
know.
of, Terry, is when Harry Carey passed away in Chicago,
Yeah,
and Harry used to do the seventh inning stretch, take me out to the ball game. They started
yeah, and
bringing
sing it.
in people to sing it and to carry on the tradition. And so I don't know what the Guardians are going to do. It might, for this season as a way to remember John, maybe they could just play a video of him
Yeah,
whenever
I
they're
think they'll
running,
have some of
something like
those.
that, and then they can,
Hmm.
you know how it is with some time, you can you kind of figure out what feels like the right thing to do. But it's an interesting idea. There's got to be some way to pay tribute to him that, and
I
I'm not sure what it is either. It's hard.
I do like the idea of a patch on the uniform for the year. You could do that and to honor whoever you'd like. Whether it's just the drum or John and the drum or something. Because he would love that. I can tell you that would be something that John would love. Would be just, man, my drums on the uniform. That would be very cool. So, and they could give away little. I mean, I have people they should give away kind of little drum fluff or something. They could do all kinds of stuff with promotions and giveaways. A shirt. People would love to have a shirt. And then John has these various charities, and they could then use that to raise some money for his different charities that he has. So that would be a good way. I'm really divided on another drummer though. I'm not quite. I'm not ready to go down that road yet.
Yeah, yeah, and they'll figure out the right thing. I'm sure the Guardians have already announced, as part of the services, that in lieu of flowers, they're asking fans to make a donation to the John J. Adams Scholarship Fund
Mm-hmm.
that he created to support students, and organizations in the arts, music, dance, and visual and industrial art. So if you want to check that out, it's at johnjadamsscholarship.org. That's johnjadamsscholarship.org. And I don't know, Terry, there's never going to be anybody else like him. I think we're pretty
Yeah,
safe in saying that.
because they didn't create it; it just happened.
Well put.
When
So
teams try to create something, it's generally pretty hard to make it work. It's like, why do some teams have all these different mascots? I remember the baseball um, before they had like a baseball bug. I'm trying to think of all the old mascots they had before Slider, and they went through a bunch of them. Remember when the Cats had a polar bear? I mean, like, what was that? And so it's hard to come up with this stuff.
and somebody like John came out of nowhere, and those are the
Yeah,
best kind, the ones that are surprising and just naturally happen. So, all right, Terry, rest in peace, John. And there's all the information if you'd like to donate, and the services are this weekend. So, all right, Terry, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk some more baseball and get to everything else. All right, how's that sound?
excellent.
All right, we'll be right back on Terry's Talkin'.
DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 57, is officially live in Ohio. Now you can legally bet on all your favorite sports anytime and anywhere right here in Ohio with DraftKings. For a limited time, new customers who sign up with code TALKIN, that's TALKIN, and bet $5 or more will receive $200 in bonus bets instantly. DraftKings has the best features, including Super Bowl same-game parlays, player props, and more with fast and easy payouts right at your fingertips. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers can use code Talkin to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you place a $5 bet on anything. That's code Talkin only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 and over, physically present in Ohio. Valid one offer per first-time depositors who have not already redeemed $200 in bonus bets via pre-launch offer. Minimum $5 deposit and wager. $200 issued as bonus bets. Eligibility restrictions apply. See dkng.co/OH for terms.
We're back on Terry's Talking. David Campbell and Terry Pluto. Terry, let's keep. I want to continue with some baseball here. Big news this week. Bally Sports is apparently headed toward bankruptcy. I think Bloomberg was the first to report it. The Guardians are one of 14 Major League Baseball teams that have their games broadcast by Bally Sports. The Cavs do too, of course. And apparently Bally's is $8.6 billion in debt. And
I don't mean to laugh, but it's like
it's a crazy big number. And they have $140 million in interest to a payment coming up this spring. They're probably going to miss that. This is going to throw a lot of teams into flux, including the Cavs and the Guardians. And Bally's just came out with this thing for their Bally Sports app. I think it was $19.99 a month. They were asking fans to pay that to watch the Cavs and the Guardians games. Where do you stand with all this? I mean, we've talked about this and written about it at cleveland.com. If you buy the entire league package for baseball, for MLB or for the NBA, you still can't watch the Cavs. It's blacked out here because Bally's owns the rights, and now they're apparently going bankrupt. So what's your take on what all this means to the Cavs and the Guardians?
First of all, baseball's had to address this problem of they can't get their games on the various streaming services and everything else. I think like half the market at this point was not getting Guardians games. I heard something like that. I'm not positive, but it's a big chunk. And so what this, most of the time you don't make a dramatic change in something unless there's some real pain involved. Well, this is major pain. So this should force MLB and the NBA and all those to say, all right, how do we want to get our games? How are we going to run these TV packages? And maybe even making revenue more fair. Because it's ridiculous that you could buy the MLB package and you don't get your local team. I mean, that's just stupid. And you talk about things that the NFL would never do. Now, granted, all their games are national because it's once a week and that, but they would just not do that because they would know it's dumb. They would find a way because they have the product. It's not like the TV stations have the product. The TV stations are consumers for this, and the various streams. You have the product. So what you want to do is get your product to the most places and also bring in the money too. So this could really force MLB to maybe consolidate. Maybe the teams take all their broadcast in-house again or whatever it is. But it can't – it really – I thought it was untenable for a while the way it was going. And so this will force it because if nobody's getting paid, they're going to want to figure out how to get paid here.
Oh, it's crazy, Terry. I mean, if you look at the NFL, the NBA, their entire marketing strategy is we want to be out there as much as possible and make it as easy as possible for fans to find our product. And man, when I was a kid, like in Chicago in the 1980s, the White Sox made a decision, like in 1983 or 85, somewhere in there, that they were going to go on a cable service called On TV, I think it was called. And if you lived in Chicago, they didn't have cable in Chicago back then. It wasn't allowed because the city council and the mayor hadn't approved it. And so I think there was probably 5 or 7 years where the White Sox were on this On TV and nobody could see the games. And they lost. That's when the Cubs took over Chicago, was because the White Sox weren't on. And nobody could watch.
WGN, and then GN went on. Then when cable came, GN went on. Remember, the Braves used to build themselves as America's team, WT, because they were on.
That's right. And the Braves and the Cubs were both nationally available. And you know how it is, Terry. People sit at home and watch baseball in the summer, especially a lot of people who maybe can't get out of the house. And there are people who live in Nebraska and and Florida who are Braves fans or Cubs fans because they were able to watch the games. And I just feel like MLB is kind of taking a very short-sighted approach to this. I know they need the money, but if you can't be seen, you're not going to get fans out to the ballpark, and you're not going to build generations of young fans. And you're right, they got to do something. So I guess my question is who? Like maybe MLB does take it in house,
Yeah,
but there
takes it
aren't a
in
lot of
house.
other options out there. I guess like Apple or Amazon could maybe buy these teams' broadcasts and stream them and make them part of Amazon Prime or Apple Plus or something. But
But you've got to
there's
be
not a lot of regional kind of broadcasters that are available to
right.
do this, right?
I'm sorry, and you got to be careful because if you do that, your demographic for baseball is older. And your older fan is not going to spend a lot of time trying to stream on Peacock. I mean, just or Hulu or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what's on who. That's the problem right there where you go, I don't know what's on who or who's where. You don't know. And if you can't get the first base on how exactly to get your games, you're in big trouble as a league. So this would be a way for it to be it uniform. First thing you start with, if you buy the Major League Baseball package, you get all the games. That's one way you can do it. And then you chop up the revenue. And then you get into other uh, areas too. So this is just to force them to face this. And one of the big reasons that there's such a inequality in revenue is because if you're in Boston or New York or LA, the bigger markets, you're getting far more, 5 or 6 times as much cable income coming in as you are in Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, et cetera. And that's for a while, uh, the old Indians had a deal with Fox Sports, where they owned it. They owned their own right. They had it in house, and then they sold it to Bally's, which I think didn't help them at all. I mean, maybe it helped them financially, but then you got into all the problems there. I don't have a lot of answers, but I know this pain will force them to get creative and to finally face this problem, which has been bubbling up for years.
Well, you're right, Terry. It might be a good thing in the long run, and it's kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off, and maybe this is the Band-Aid coming off, and they can solve this because they need to be out there more. There's no doubt about it. So,
And your the audience was the current way you're doing your audience was dwindling every year because people were going away from the cable. And I don't know, on this app and thing, will people buy into that? I don't know. Maybe some.
well, the NBA and the NFL, you've got to be everywhere all the time on every platform. I mean, that's their approach, and I think baseball
Mm-hmm.
needs to follow down that path. So, all right, Terry, you want to get into the Cavaliers here?
Sure.
Let's do it. All right, so we're taping this on Wednesday morning. Cavs lost 100-97 to the Heat last night, and I read your column this morning, Terry, and I could just feel I don't know if steam was coming out of your ears, but I could just
Mm-hmm.
feel you squeezing your pen or whatever as you're watching the game.
Yeah.
You have ideas on the way the Cavs are playing and why they're losing games like they lost last night, and especially against playoff caliber teams. Talk about what you saw last night from the Cavs and what they need to do differently.
Well, first of all, they jumped out to a 16-5 lead about 5 minutes into the game, which means, by the way, so for the rest of the game, they scored a grand total of 71 points. And meanwhile, of course, the other team scored 95. And that's a problem right there. They came out playing that kind of tough way, and they went to the rim a few times, and they scored. And they thought that you kind of knocked Miami out. Of course, Miami plays that way all the time. They want to play it slow. They want to play it hard. They want to frustrate you, and they want to take you into a place where you're taking shots that you don't want to take, or you're simply not making. And it drove me nuts. I mean, when you look at the box score, and this stat just jumped out at me. And when you're 11 of 40 on 3-pointers, but you're 29 of 43 on 2-pointers, first of all, I don't like that 50-50 ratio. Not when you have big men are able to score. But it's like, why are you shooting all these 3-pointers? They are not going in. And furthermore, when you did get the ball inside, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley were very effective and just get them the ball. and we've talked about this in the past, but this whole stupid stuff about, 3 points are better than two. And my counter is always in 2 points are better than none, especially when the 3-pointers are not going in. Right now, Donovan Mitchell is struggling. I think, how about this? Since he's come back, he's played 95 minutes, he's taken 2 free throws. Tells you he's not driving to the basket.
That's an
Now,
incredible stat.
is he not driving to the basket because the groin thing and he just doesn't feel good going in there? So he's settling for a lot of these long jumpers. Sometimes he's off balance. And so either you've got to, if your Bickerstaff, say, we got to get you healthy or we got to get you going to the basket. But either way, you can't just keep jacking up these shots that are not going in from a long way out. And also you got to read the game. This is not going to be one of those 120-point games. You could tell early on it was going to be slowest defensive, and also basically that's the way these guys play. That's how Miami's going to play. And secondly, the Cavs play a very slow pace, given how things are. So I don't know. I just found that this was it was a very frustrating game for me because I just thought that they didn't make the adjustments that needed to be made offensively. Yes, they could have been better defensively, but if you hold a team to 100 points, remember that in the NBA, teams average 112. That's like holding them 90 or less. You got to win the game.
Well, the other thing, Terry, I mean, you know how it is in the NBA. This is the time of year that is just drudgery for these guys. They're banged up. They're just trying to get to the All-Star break so they can get a few days off in a row. And the other thing you brought up in your column that I wanted to bring up here is this is the time of year when you can ride Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley.
Yeah.
Dump the ball down to them and give it to the guys who can shoot 60, 70% from the field so that you're not having to work so hard on the perimeter. And I thought you made a great point. Like, they should be riding those guys into the All-Star break. They've shown they can do it when you get them the ball, right? So you want to see Ricky Rubio and the other guards feeding these guys the ball more and giving them more shots, right?
They were 15 to 23, those two guys. I see Mobley taking a huge step up the last month offensively. He's finding things he can do. Now, he's not the typical low post guy, but you could isolate him on the wing, and you have your shooters. You spread them out a little bit, isolate them on the wing, just let him go. He takes 1-2 dribbles, and he whirls, and he's at the rim. He's making these nice little jump hooks. Of course, then there's another thing. Towards the end of the game, he's on the 3-point line. They throw him the ball. He fires up a rock from there. Good. Let's have him shoot 3-pointers too. This is what they need. It's like, please. And I'm not anti 3-pointers. I get that that's the way you have to play. But that game was basically figured out any way you could get a point was valuable. And what people miss when they talk about, firing these threes from the outside and you throw it inside and it's only 2, they've missed a key point. People who are big men inside, they get fouled. That puts free throws at the line. It gives you, quote unquote, free points. It puts, the foul total on the other team, sets up penalty situations. It actually gives some people sometimes time, especially if you're playing hard defensively, a little bit of a rest while the guy shoots the free throws. There's a lot of good things when you're inside. And finally, if you're a big man and you hardly ever get the ball, and you finally do, you're probably not going to throw it back out. You're going to now, if it's coming into you and going back, you'll just pass the ball more because Allen's a pretty good passer. Mobley's an excellent passer, and so I'd like to see that happen. And usually I'm dwelling on the defense, but 100 points. You give up 100 points at home, you should win.
There's no doubt. Terry, I want to ask you kind of an existential question about the Cavs. So they're 31 and 22, right? Number 5 seed in the East. You see a result like last night, and I started thinking, like, are the Cavs good? Like, are they good? Because it seems like when they play a playoff caliber team, this is the kind of game they lose a lot. And I'm like, should we expect more from this team or not? Because as you've written many times, and we've talked about on this podcast, I think the entire starting lineup's under 26, right? What should we expect? Are these guys good? And what would be a good season for them? Should they win a playoff series? Should they win 2 playoff series? Like, how good is this team in your mind? And what should we expect?
I think I picked them at 48 wins, which would make them like 14 over, like 48 and 34.
They're on pace to win 50, pretty much. So
Yeah,
50 wins, but like,
it's hard
what
to
should
win.
you expect
First of
from
all,
this team?
it's hard to win 50 in the NBA. It really is. And I want to caution some people too. We've talked about Mitchell, and I've made my case where I do think he's the second best player I've seen here since LeBron. But Mitchell was never able to carry Utah very deep in the playoffs. Keep that in mind. I think second round was the farthest he's got. I'd have to look, but that was one of the frustrations there in Utah why they decided to trade Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, is they felt they just couldn't get real deep in the playoffs. That doesn't mean there's a problem with Mitchell, but I'm just simply saying this is not LeBron. This is not Giannis. And of course, Giannis wasn't Giannis for a while either until the team grew around him and they figured out they changed coaches and they figured out a way to play. So I just think they're pretty good, and I take the long view with them. What I want them to do is learn how to play in these type of games. And just because everybody shoots threes, don't just jack up threes when you're 11 of 40. And some Bickerstaff usually has a pretty good handle on things, but I think he puts a lot of his efforts on the defensive end, which I'm all for. But sometimes you just have to say, look, Donovan, you got to go to the rim. Even Darius, they hate mid-range shots. They hate that 15, 18-footer, but Darius is really good at that shot. So instead of that 25-footer, and it's not feeling real good, I think he was 2 of 7 yesterday. Take a dribble or two in, pump fake dribble or two in. You'll have that shot open all day and you'll make it. I mean, Mitchell took 13 3-pointers yesterday, and I think he made 3. And he took 4 shots, basically drives to the rim, and he made 3. So we've been praising him or whatever, but when that kind of situation is happening, all you got to, he was 3 of 13 on threes and 3 of 4 on twos. All you've got to do is say, Donovan, we're in the third quarter here. Get to the rim, man. Let's get some points. This is a tough game. And also, if he goes in there, and even if he misses, he's going to attract so much defensive attention. All of a sudden, Mobley and Allen will be able to crash the boards for offensive rebounds and not be blocked out. So there's a lot of good things that people miss when they just turn this into a math problem.
All right. So in terms of how you think fans should feel in terms of getting frustrated or being hopeful, it seems like you're in the camp of like, it's going to be okay. They'll
Yeah.
figure it out. That's
Yeah,
kind
I
of where
think
you
they
stand.
will. And this is what I want to see over their last, 50 games or whatever they have left, 49, I think. And no, that's incorrect. Bad math on my part.
They played 53, so they have
53.
about
They have 29.
29
They have
left.
29 left. Yes. So what we're talking about there is how you're going to play after the break and set yourself up. But you really do want to, fight to get in that top 6. I think that's your goal, and that's not a given at all. You just saw Miami's right behind them. Do you think Miami's going to end up in the play-in? I don't know. I don't think so. You got Brooklyn. You got all those different teams, and that's good. That's challenging. Well, I'll tell you what I do like about this, and I kind of like how the play-in tournaments created this, is it puts more emphasis on the regular season. Even if Steve Kerr doesn't want to play 5 guys some nights or whatever, you do want to be in that top 6. You don't want to get in the play-in tournament. Where I remember when Braun was here, it was kind of like, look, I don't care whether we're the first seed or the 8th seed, as long as we're in, that's good enough. And when you drop it down to 8, usually if you win 45, 46 games, you're in there. Now that's not the case, because you could end up in that play-in thing, and then you have a bad day or two, you're done.
All right, Terry. So the Cavs play on Thursday, which is Groundhog Day. They're home against Memphis at 7:30. Then they play Sunday at Indiana at 5 o'clock tip, and then Monday at Washington. Those are their next 3 games, and we're getting close to the All-Star break. And of course, the trade deadline is February 9th. So we shall see. So, all right, let's move to the NFL, Terry. Did you watch the games over the weekend? And if so, what struck you? Anything make you think of the Browns over the weekend?
Well, I bailed kind of early on the the game with San Francisco, because it was pretty obvious that when you're down with Josh Johnson was in there, whoever it was not going to be good. And but underrated for Philadelphia is their defense. And you roll back to, you got Mahomes, you got Burrow, but what was the final score of that game? Come on, David, what was it?
34-7 or something?
No, I'm sorry, the
Oh,
Cincinnati.
the Cincinnati. Oh, 3-point game, 23-20, right?
Yeah, not 33-30, not 43-40, 23-20. And you had two elite quarterbacks, but you also had two very good defenses keeping that thing close. So while there's all this emphasis, clearly you've got to get Watson up to speed and playing well. You have to complement that with, I would say, maybe not a great defense, but at least a good one, because these other teams have good defenses. I mean, Jones was shown. Remember, we talked about the top three guys to the Defensive Player of the Year award. Jones from Kansas City, he was like all over the place in that game.
Yeah, absolutely. There were two things that kind of hit me, Terry, going back to kind of Brown stuff. But number one is the AFC is going to be very tough to win these next 4 years, even with Deshaun Watson. The Browns are going to have their work cut out. I think they know that. And the second thing was, the old only in Cleveland OIC mantra that we've heard over the last 50 years of all the crazy stuff happening in Cleveland. The Bengals lost the other day because one of their defensive players pushed Patrick Mahomes out of bounds and gave them a 15-yard penalty for a field goal at the end. So it's not only in Cleveland. Crazy stuff happens in other towns too. So I thought maybe some Browns fans could take some solace in knowing that other teams lose games in bad ways every once in a while too, even in big ones. So.
And you have to kick your field goals. I think the kicker, McPherson from Cincinnati, still has yet to miss in the postseason in his 2-year career.
Yeah, which is really something. So.
And look, was it a 41-yarder that Buckner made for Kansas City? Not a given. Big moment. Down
Cold
the middle.
Weather. Yep.
Cold weather, kicked it down the middle, 3 points.
Yep.
So, those are all things that I saw. And Mahomes, we've all liked Mahomes, but man, he played from the pocket for the most part.
All right, the other NFL thing this week, Terry. Well, a couple things. The salary cap is going up to $224.8 million, and the franchise tags have been determined. And this is interesting because I'm wondering if the Ravens might put a franchise tag on Lamar Jackson for $32.416 million next year and see how it goes. That is going to be one of the big storylines of the offseason. But so anyway, that was one thing I thought I'd mention. The other thing, the Pro Bowl is just getting ridiculous, right?
What is the point?
Yeah.
They already have a golf drive thing in it. Just let them go play golf and get a trophy. That's it. Well, they can take their wives to Hawaii and have a nice whatever. It's nothing.
Yeah, something like that. But I mean, this week, Derek Carr and Tyler Huntley were offered spots in the Pro Bowl, which is so crazy to me.
By the way, a couple of people email, and I agree. Well, if you're going to do Tyler Huntley, do Jacoby Brissett.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you look at Jacoby Brissett's stats, I mean, and you wrote about this during the season, Terry, he was top third in the league in terms of productivity.
Yeah.
And so where's he? Tyler Huntley, I think, played 6 games, and Derek Carr didn't even finish the season with the Raiders because they told him to go away.
It is a complete joke, and they should just admit. I'm surprised the NFL lets that go on because they tend to be smarter than that. This is almost like a baseball thing. Let's just keep ignoring the problem until it gets worse. The Pro Bowl, once upon a time, when they only had maybe 2 teams in the playoffs, or sometimes back, like for example, when the Browns in 1964 won, they just kind of won. There was not all these rounds of playoffs. But with all that, these guys, they like the trip. They'll take the trip to Hawaii and that, but you can kind of make it in-house thing. And they go out there. You could just have an NFL day on TV. They all talk. They do interviews. Throw some footballs around. But
yeah, you pick
a real Pro Bowl team though. This is the team.
And it is the team, regardless of who makes the Super Bowl and who doesn't.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
We're pretty much like 2 steps from that old Superstars show. Is that what it's called, Terry? You remember on ABC where they had Howard Cosell and I'm here to interview Suzanne Summers, who just swam the 50-yard freestyle. You remember that show?
Exactly. Oh, it's just stupid.
It's like we're headed down that path.
Yeah. And that's why I just think make it like maybe a convention for stars where they come in and they, you pay them a bunch of money to come there. They could play some golf. The TV will be around just interviewing different people and highlight packages and just make it a big TV show. And don't, worry about kicking or whatever they're doing. I don't know what the skills contest is. I almost feel like I'm wasting time talking about it because it's such a waste of time.
Yeah, it is. So I'm sure the NFL will see where things are headed. They'll probably make some adjustments next season. I'm guessing because it used to mean something to make the Pro Bowl, and now it doesn't. So
no.
All right, Terry, we got some. I'm sorry, we got some Hey Terry questions. Did you have something else you want to say about the Pro Bowl, or if we spent too much time on it already?
No, we probably did, but I just want to underline that the couple things that struck me though in those games was that these teams have good defenses, and secondly, they have pretty good special teams, and that is a big part of the equation. And on top of it, the Browns, now you will start to really begin to feel the pain of the Watson contract. Even though the salary cap is going up, the picks that have been traded, the money that is there, they're going to have to figure out what to do with Amari Cooper's contract. I think it's on the books for $23 million or something like that. Miles has a big number; it's in the high 20s, and of course, I believe Watson counts $56 million on the cap. So you just add those up right there. And also, I believe Denzel's going to come in at 20 some. So you're looking at almost $120 million for 4 guys.
And that all does not bode well for John Johnson sticking around because they could save, I think, $13 million if he's gone.
What do you think of him?
I was not a fan. I really wasn't. I thought he quit on a lot of plays, and I thought he had some really good games, and I thought he had some really bad games, and there were some plays where you could see on film that he just stopped. Some of those big runs, and I don't think he's going to be back. I don't think they'll want him at that number, but that's just me. I'm basing that solely on my opinion and what I saw. So
he was a big disappointment to me too. I thought he would be more of a playmaker, and he just wasn't. And so, they've done better, David, when they've brought in people on some of these 1-year contracts than some of their bigger investments. And when you go back and think about, Posick or, the guy from
Clowney last year.
Oh, Clowney, yeah. But the guy from Baltimore, from Indianapolis, they brought in to play linebacker, and he
Anthony
got hurt.
Walker.
Anthony Walker.
Yep.
Really a nice signing. And some of these other players that they have brought in for 1 year, Olivier Vernon was a guy in a trade. Then they re-upped him for a year. Those kind of guys, as opposed to, say, John Johnson or Austin Hooper, for example, was another that didn't do very well. So that would be one thing where, if I were Andrew Berry's boss, say, what is our strategy for free agency here? Get the analytics department going. Let's lay out everybody that's been signed, the type of contract you got them on, and their productivity. And then let's look at our scouting reports and who we were considering. See, this is an internal thing that we picked John Johnson over this guy to give the $13 million a year to or whatever. Was it right or not? See, that's the nice thing, that if you ever get internally, you have the reports. You should have the rankings of the various free agents they were going for, and where they allocated the money, good, bad, or sometimes it's just indifferent. Maybe you gave money to a guy that didn't play very well, but the other 2 guys on the list didn't do it either. Oh, I got a question.
Oh, sure.
Would you trade this has been around, but would you trade a first-round pick to get a coach?
Oh no, the Sean Payton equation.
Yeah. I think Belichick, they gave up a second rounder or 2 second rounders way back in the old days. The Patriots did to the Jets.
Yes, it was something like that. It doesn't happen all that often. John Gruden also was traded, I remember, from the Raiders to the Buccaneers. So it does happen, but Yeah, you don't see it very often. It's really interesting when it does happen, and they must feel like he's worth it. And hey, it worked out for Tampa Bay. They won a Super Bowl with John Gruden, and it worked out for the Patriots when they got Belichick. So maybe this will work out for the Broncos. That was
But
something.
I'm saying, would you trade a first round pick?
I would not, but it depends on the coach. I mean, would you trade a first round pick for Bill Belichick? Yes.
Yeah, maybe not at this point in his career, but Andy Reid, yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
I should take that back. Sean Payton might be worth it. And little known fact, Terry, did you know that I played high school football against Sean Payton?
You did?
We played, yeah, my high school played, he went to Naperville Central High School. We played them in the playoffs. We were beating them 17-14 in the second half. And then Sean Payton spent the entire second half running around in the backfield, and we couldn't catch him. He probably threw for 300 yards, and we lost 34-17.
Was he good in college or anything?
Oh yeah, he went to Eastern Illinois and broke every passing record there. And then Tony Romo came after him and broke all of his records. So anyway, that's my Sean Payton story. Nobody wants to.
No, I like that. That's always cool. Those are always good. In fact, if you're out there and you want to send us, hey Terry, email to Dave and I played against whomever it was.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see. And tell the truth. I remember I faced a guy named Dave Tobick, and he pitched a few years with the Tigers and that in the summer. And I think I only batted against him once. I never saw the ball. He's probably only throwing 90, 91, but it felt like 120 to me. So those are the kind of things that they're always fun stories.
Yeah, I love that idea, Terry. So listen, anybody who wants to tell us who you played against, notable people you played sports against, send it to sports@cleveland.com. Put Terry's Talkin, or I played against so and so, and
you have
line,
to
and we'll try and get
tell the truth.
Tell the truth.
I don't want to hear that I faced Shane Bieber in college out in L.A. and when he was in Orange County All-Star game, and I went 2 for 3, and it was a line drive was my third out. Don't do that.
All right, we'll see what we get. I think that's a wonderful idea, and then we'll get him on next week's podcast. So, all right, speaking of which, we got some Hey Terry questions. Again, the email if you want to send in is sports@cleveland.com. This was kind of an interesting one, Terry. It's from Philip Camp in Parma, and he says, hey, Terry, would Pete Franklin make it in today's market? The first sports book I bought was an autographed copy of Pete and Terry's You Could Argue, But You'd Be Wrong. And he says, as for a book recommendation, Philip says, Brother Lawrence's classic Practice of the Presence of God. It's only 96 pages, but quite helpful. Thanks for that question, Philip. So what do you think? How would Pete Franklin fare in today's sports media market, Terry?
I don't think very well. Although, unless he would adjust, I'm kind of divided because Pete was one of the smartest people I knew. He knew jazz, he knew classic literature, all this stuff. So he figured out what worked. I mean, now he's so outrageously politically incorrect that they would have gone crazy about that, to be picketing the station and everything. He just had the advantage of being on a 50,000 watt WTAM doing sports talk when nobody else was doing it. And I remember WERE had, in fact, Greg Brinda was sort of coming up back then, but the poor Greg, he was on a station with no signal. And on top of that, Franklin was hooked into, all the others. Now, Franklin went to WFAN in New York. It did not work out well at all for him there. Then he ended up in the Bay Area for a number of years. And it was okay, but it was nothing like here. I mean, he had the advantage of, it's kind of like somebody wants to play the drum after John Adams. Well, somebody did the drum and did it for a long time. Well, Pete Franklin did Pete Franklin. Pete Franklin would say something like, tell me, I got a question for you. How can you wear a straitjacket and dial a phone at the same time to call me? All right, right there, you're being fired. Now, I didn't say that. I am simply quoting a Pete Franklin thing from way back when.
That was a good impersonation. It was a good one.
Yeah,
Terry.
So that's what he would do.
It would be a fascinating thing to see. I'll tell you that. It would.
Yeah.
I do wonder because people who are really good at hosting shows and being in sports media adapt. And I didn't know Pete, but I get the sense that he might have adapted, but I don't know. You knew him better than I did, obviously.
He's also just, even though he was not from here at all, he was Cleveland. And he did the work. It would really anger the people like he and Hal Levis had a long time feud that went on and on. And but also was because Pete would break stories now and then. Now, granted, they had the 50,000 is what is now WTAM. He was on that, and they had the teams, but still, he would show up at games. He would talk to the GMs. They would talk to him, and the other thing, like if you now he might even rip these guys when they're not there, but when they were on the air and he interviewed them, David, I mean, it wasn't as he was nice, but he gave them a lot of room to explain. See, he was smart about that. As I said, he was smart about that stuff. So really, none of these people were afraid to go on with Pete because generally he kind of gave them softball questions. And I think his feeling was, like, I've been taking him apart now for the last 2 weeks, so let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, the old fairness doctrine, give them equal time, huh? Yeah, so, well, great stuff. Thanks for that question. All right, we're running a little short on time, Terry. Let's take one more. This is from Chuck Laughlin, who I think emailed us a while back. Chuck is from Menor. He says, hey, Terry, and I think you got a question about this over the weekend in your Hey, Terry column that you wrote. Chuck says, the Browns front office seems to be high on Stefanski. However, when I look at the head coaches of our division rivals, I would gladly trade Stefanski for any one of them. Would you?
Right now, yes. How can you not say that? What, you don't want Mike Tomlin? You don't like John Harbaugh? They're never bad. They're never bad. I mean, if those guys were 7-10, they would be jumping off buildings. They're never bad.
And then Zach Taylor just went to the Super Bowl a year ago.
Second, twice. He hooked up with Burrow. And by the way, I remember when Taylor was hired, I had a couple of GMs that I respect tell me, I don't think that guy's all that good. Of course, the bottom line is you don't know. Most people at the time, if you were to line up before they became head coaches, Stefanski and Zach Taylor, very few would have picked Taylor over Stefanski. Now, granted, he got the quarterback, but also just they have a total team over there. They got a kicker, they got defense, and they got the quarterback, and they're really good.
I would have been really curious to see if Joe Burrow had ended up with the Browns, what people would think of Stefanski, because that guy is a stone cold killer. But anyway, Terry, you know what they say in investing, that past performance is no guarantee of future success. And I think this is what makes sports great. It's like, I'm better than you, and I'm going to prove it. And I mean, Kevin Stefanski was the 2020 NFL Coach of the Year and led them to an 11-5 record. And that was not that long ago. And I would agree. I think the other three coaches, their resumes are better at this point. But hey, the next 4 years are going to make or break the Browns and Kevin Stefanski. And they've made some changes. I think it's going to be just a remarkable 2023 season. I can't wait to see these divisional games. It's really going to be something. But anyway, thanks for that question, Chuck. We appreciate it. Again, if you want to send us questions for next week's podcast or stories of you playing sports against notable people, hit us at sports@cleveland.com, and we'll try and get it on next week's podcast. Terry, do you have, we had one book recommendation already. Do you have one for this week you wanted to throw out real quick?
No, basically, though, I have the cheap plug of this week.
Oh, great.
And that is that Tuesday night at 6:30, be at the Tuscarawas Library in New Philadelphia this Tuesday at 6:30. Myself and my NPR partner, Amanda Rabinowitz from WKSU, we've been doing weekly commentaries on it's like 7 NPR stations now in Northeast Ohio, I think for like 15 years. And she's from down there, so that's where she started. So she's a New Philadelphia legend, and we have a good time when we go down and do that. So Sunday, 6:30, if you bring some books, I'll sign them, but the prerequisite is that they should be a book that I wrote.
Or you with Pete Franklin. That's also acceptable.
Yeah, right.
All right, Terry, that's going to do it. Thanks for that. Get out to that library appearance if you can. And one last plug, I ask everyone to try and subscribe to cleveland.com to help support our journalism. The easiest way to do it, and if you're a Browns fan especially, if you go to cleveland.com/Browns and click on the blue banner at the top, you can sign up. You get a Browns newsletter that we produce every day, all the content on cleveland.com, and you get to join our Browns Football Insider subtext group where our reporters will text you their thoughts on the team every day, even in the middle of February when the season is over. That's it. I think we're good, Terry, right?
I am done.
All right. Have a great week, everybody. We will catch you next time on Terry's Talkin'.